Amy trudged along half asleep, aware of the other two, but barely. The sound of their footsteps, the whisper of moving fabric came through her consciousness, but that was all. Her body moved on automatic pilot. They passed more ventilator shafts, giving these thicketed places wide berth, fearing what might be hiding there. They walked in the open, often looking back. They were being followed at a distance. No birds sang, but now and then one would racket up in panic from a nest in the grass and frighten the three walkers. The breeze died. Flies and bees zoomed by, exuberant in the warm sunshine. Sometimes Amy would see what resembled a fuzzy hornet's nest bobbing along a hillside, and as she watched, it would stop or duck out of sight behind a tree. When that happened, she got a sick feeling in her stomach. Suppose the crazies attacked and she had to kill them. She wasn't sure she could. She considered giving Axel the gun, and some instinct warned her not to. He hadn't shut out for a long time now, but just in case. A sound made her glance at James and squint to see him fumbling in the bag he carried. He withdrew the floppy white cloth hat she recognized as Elton's, shook it out, and put it on Axel's head. It nearly covered the boy's eyes. Axel was startled and yanked it off. The underside of the limp brim was stiff with a red-brown stain. "What is that?" The boy held the thing gingerly between two fingers, at arm's length. "A hat," James spoke for the first time in hours. "Wear it, for your eyes." "No, it's bloody." "It's dry." "It's disgusting." Axel let the hat fall. "They bashed his head in." "Yes." James retrieved the hat, put it on, reached into the bag again, and held out Elton's sunglasses to Amy. She didn't want to hurt his feelings, but neither did she want to wear those glasses. "You wear them," she said. "Your eyes are sore too, and you have to see to take care of us." "My rag's fine. It holds my eyes open. Those won't." "These are better," he said. "Clean. No blood." "You wear them, please." He hesitated, his eyes searching her face as if trying to judge her sincerity. Then he nodded and put on the glasses. They walked on for a mile or more. Then Amy stumbled and fell over a vine, and it took the other two to pull her up. The effort left them so exhausted that they stopped to rest there and ate the mush Amy had in her pockets. She was so tired she could hardly chew. Only fear of what might happen if she fell asleep kept her awake. And thirst. The water bottle was gone, left behind in their flight from the thicket. She sat looking at the empty land and wondered where the crazies were. That reminded her. She pulled the gun out of her pocket and lay it there, where it could be quickly grabbed if any of them tried to rush the hill. James's glasses glinted in the sun as he looked around and stared at the weapon. With a sigh, he reached out and picked it up and put it in his pocket. "Children shouldn't have to kill," he said, and pushed himself up on his feet. The afternoon was hard. Sun and fatigue made progress very slow. All three staggered as they walked. Once Axel sank down on his knees, and Amy thought he'd fallen, only to have him get up and hand her an olive green and speckled pebble. "Eat it," he said, and picked up two more from a pile of twigs. She was sure, then, that he had gone from weird to crazy. "You can't eat rocks," she said. "It's an egg." He was tired and impatient. "Don't be stupid. Birds lay eggs, like chickens." She stared at him, ignorant. "Like this." He carefully tapped one pebble against the other, and one broke. Inside, a yellow ball floated in thick water, and he drank it. He took her pebble back and cracked it. "Open your mouth," he ordered, and when she did, he poured the water in. It had a funny, stringy taste. She watched to see how James liked his. He held it in his mouth a while, and then swallowed with a gulp. "Raw," he said. "I never had eggs raw." "You know what they are?" Axel was surprised. James nodded. "Long time ago, before they sent me down." The man smiled, as if pleased by the memory. "More eggs?" he asked. "I guess so." Axel looked around. "If we can find them. I never thought of it. I should have. We can look as we walk." "We better," James said. "No more mush." "None in your bag?" He shook his head. They had to rest every 10 minutes or so after that. Each stop got longer as the hills grew steeper. Axel foraged as he went and found a variety of eggs, almost all tiny. Amy tried but couldn't see well enough to find anything but a few strawberries, and those only because the bright red color caught her eye. James shot at 6 birds and missed them all, inexperienced at small, swift targets. "How did you shoot the rabbits?" Axel asked wonderingly. "They were eating, sitting still." At last they came to an upgrade steeper than any they'd climbed before. By the time they reached the top, Amy knew that she couldn't go any farther. She sank down on a patch of wild oats. One frond poked her in the ear. It tickled, but she was too tired to move or even scratch. She just sat there, staring like a lumpin at the ventilator housing on the downside of the hill. Axel sat down nearby, but James stood. "If I sit down, I won't get up again," he said. She wondered if he meant he was going to die there, and she squinted up at him. He was beginning to look the way she remembered. Filthy, dirty, and unshaven, his eyes haggard. He was breathing harder than she was. "Are you okay?" she asked, not sure what she meant by that. "No," he said between breaths, "but we need fire to keep long-haired ones away in the dark. I'll get trees." It was almost sunset by the time they'd gathered all the dry brush they could find, carried it to the center of the hilltop, and stacked it in low piles around them. In the fading light, they saw 2 wild men in the distance running after something and calling. James thought they were hunting rabbits or birds to eat. "At least they aren't chasing us," said Axel. "Can we light the fire?" He had arranged a small pile of brushwood on a bare spot of clay, assuring the 2 city dwellers that he had often done this before. It was called camping. When James aimed the laser and set the twigs on fire, the flames licked up cheerfully. But after a few minutes burning, more smoke than flame appeared, the smoke redolent with the green pine boughs in the fire's heart. The 3 moved back out of the cloud and watched it rise in a column on the still evening air. "It'll quit smoking," Axel said, cheered by the light. "Wait till it dries a little." He divided up the birds' eggs he'd found, 5 for each, and Amy parceled out 7 berries among them, and that was their supper. It was just enough to aggravate their hunger pains, but it quenched some of their thirst. They sat, each one facing a different way, backs to the smoking fire, listening to their stomachs growl, resting, forcing themselves to stay awake and watch. "Why would the crazies kill Elton?" Axel broke a long silence. "He wasn't hunting them." "Maybe they thought he was." "Maybe they remember," James said unexpectedly. "I was sent down. Others are put out, exiled, like you, taken to the city's edge and driven off by guards in white, to make sure no one came back to the domes. Some did, starving, hurled themselves against the glass, begging to be let in again. I saw them. I was a child." His voice trailed off. "Why didn't the authorities just kill them and get it over with?" asked Amy. "To teach the ones inside, to frighten, to make them glad to go down into darkness." "Are there many outside?" "No, or we would see more." Amy didn't understand that, but it didn't matter. "Elton followed us to make sure we got away?" she asked. "No," James said, "to make sure you didn't come back." "Oh." She thought about that for a while. Then, "James, how old were you when they sent you down to our level?" 7. "How old are you now?" His face clouded. "I don't know. I did. I lost count, sleeping, watching. The lights were always on." She saw that she was confusing him, making him think back into the dark years. "It doesn't matter," she said quickly. "I just wondered. Valerie, my mother, she's 27. He didn't say anything for a while, and his gaunt face retained its troubled look. Then he asked, "When Janet died, how old were you?" 8. "How long ago?" 3 years. "That's all?" It seemed a very long time to her, but she said, "Yes, I'm 11 now. I was 26 the last time I saw Janet." "You're 29 then." He looked very old to her, much older than her mother. "29," he said wonderingly. "I live to be old." "The guard told me, you're getting old." I didn't believe her. "That's not old." Axel turned and stared at him. "There are people where I live 3 times that old." "Why?" said James. Axel frowned. "They just are." "What do you mean, why?" "How can they?" Axel didn't know how to reply. Then he grinned. "You'll see," he promised. "It's a very nice place. You'll live to be 100. "Will I want to?" James asked in all seriousness. "Everybody does," the boy assured him. James thought that over. "But they belong there." He spoke slowly, as if trying to articulate something more difficult than usual for him. "They were born there. I wasn't. If I go there, maybe they won't want a crazy around. No one does. Not even other crazies. They might not like it if I live that long. Drive me away." "They won't," Axel denied it vehemently. "You're not a crazy." "Not really. Not any more than I am. The city makes people be ugly. Be..." He couldn't think clearly what he felt to be true. "It makes you things you wouldn't be if you weren't there," he concluded lamely, and then brightened at another thought. "You'll be a hero, both of you, when they hear all you've done for me. You saved my life." Amy listened to this exchange and thought her own thoughts. She couldn't imagine Axel's world any more than she could imagine anyone feeling gratitude for any act of hers. Her experience with people had taught her to expect either hostility or indifference. Janet had been the only exception, the only person who cared, and Amy wondered what Janet would think if she could see where her dreams of outside had led. She stared down at a clotted briar scratch on her left foot. Suppose James's fears were right, that Axel's people would not want them. Her eyes closed to shut out the despair induced by exhaustion, and she dozed off. A sound woke her and she jumped, heart pounding. It was dark. She clutched at the rag around her eyes and pulled it up to see the blurry light of a dying fire. She reached out, felt the brush pile next to her, tore loose a dry branch and laid it on the flickering light. Smoke billowed out into her face. Her eyes teared and she began to cough. On the other side of the fire, James gave a mighty snort of a snore and jumped up as he came awake, conditioned by years of being kicked by passerby. For an instant he stared wild-eyed at Amy, then remembered where he was and felt his pocket for the gun. "Yes?" he whispered, and nodded toward the night around them. "I don't know. A sound." Something whizzed past her and struck the fire. Sparks flew up. A pebble hit Axel's back with a soft thud, and he whimpered in his sleep and curled into a fetal position. James pressed the trigger. Blue beams drew lines into the darkness. In reply, the top half of a bottle hit and shattered in the fire. James aimed in the direction it had come from. "Get down," he ordered Amy. A stone just missed his head. Dead leaves and pine needles in the grass downhill caught fire. Tiny flames flickered. Most were stillborn, but a few lasted long enough to ignite larger things. A pine cone caught and blazed and set alight the pine branch it clung to. A fringe of fire began to creep through the grass. A guttural outcry was the first sound from their attackers. Amy saw a shadow run silhouetted against the smoky light. "Set more grass on fire, James," she called out to him. "Make 'em run to get away from it." He followed her suggestion, as ignorant as she, as unthinking, until runnels of flame nearly encircled the hilltop. Downhill, a waxthorn torched. A warm wind breathed to life, and the flames danced beneath the smoke. Amy was sorry the light hurt her eyes. The flames were full of pretty colors, greens and blues and orange. "What is he doing?" Axel startled her with a frightened whisper. "They were throwing rocks, trying to hit us," Amy explained. "James is chasing them with fire." "He'll burn us all." Axel stood up, agitated. A rock flew over them, and Amy yanked him down. "It's all right," she said. "There's no grass right here." "You don't understand." Axel was half in tears. "You've never seen a grass fire. It can move so fast you can't outrun the flames. You can't breathe smoke." "We don't have to. Just the crazies have to." The boy looked at her and shook his head. "Stupid." Amy didn't understand why he couldn't appreciate the cleverness of their defense. It got rid of the wild men without having to kill them, and it offered protection. The fire gained a life of its own. In 10 minutes their hilltop was ringed by flames, some moving downhill, some creeping sideways. The rock throwing had stopped. Birds squawked or sang bewilderedly in the darkness. Frightened field mice squeaked. A rabbit ran in panic. Grass wilted and smoked, while last year's dry underlayer caught and flamed. Hot air rose and rolled up through the smoke to become a wind. The breeze was from the south. Amy thought the ground was shaking, but she couldn't be sure. Lately her body had done a lot of shaking on its own. She pressed her hand flat against the clay and felt vibrations. It reminded her of the way the walls shook in the city at night. Was the outside old too? Look! Axel pointed toward the ventilator thicket. It was burning, and a path of flame stretched from there halfway up the hill. Bends are moving in the freight tunnels down below, pushing air out of the shafts. Feel the ground shaking? That's... The fire wind gusted. A cloud of smoke and soot enveloped them, and Axel's excitement ended in a coughing spasm. Amy choked and turned away, eyes and lungs burning. What had been air was suddenly all smoke. She jumped up in panic, into the thick of the cloud, and ran, eyes tearing, whimpering as her bare feet and ankles touched the hot spots of charred sod. She ran where there was no flame, for flame was the only thing she could see. She fell and rolled and crawled, a terror-stricken animal desperate for oxygen. Nothing and no one else existed for her now. She reached a strip of burning grass, stood up and tried to jump the flames. Her left foot caught under something as she landed, and pitched her, face down. She rose again, spitting dirt, swallowed the sourness welling up in her throat, and took 2 more steps before her left knee buckled. When she hit the ground this time, nothing hurt. Her head struck against a rock.